Good evening, Oyster River. This is Superintendent Jim Morse, and we are having a quasi-remote meeting tonight to organize ourselves around a finance committee. I would just take a few seconds to read the charge the board has given the finance committee. The board finance committee will be composed of 3 board members and be charged to assist the board in preparation of the 2021-22 budget and reviews short-term budget adjustments in response to COVID-19. It will meet throughout the year with the superintendent, the business manager, and relevant administrators to explore tools and strategies for developing a workable budget. It will regularly solicit questions from the entire board. It will report on its findings in a timely manner. In order to support transparency in the process, the committee will keep detailed minutes and provide those minutes to the full board. The aim will be to help the full school board develop an evidence-based budget goal for fiscal year 22 by September of 2020, and a fiscal year 22 budget that has been developed through a rigorous process that explores all possible economies and meets all the educational needs of the district by December 2020. Unless continued by the board as of March 2021 organizational meeting, it will cease to exist. So if I just could take the liberty, board members, just to talk a little bit about the reason that the board has taken this unprecedented move. Largely, it's due to the impact of the economy that we face. We're concerned about our local taxpayers. We're concerned about state revenues. Most recent article I read was that state revenues were down 22%. Typically, the board would develop a budget goal in the fall, and then over a 2-month period, 2.5-month period, develop the proposed budget. Because of the circumstances we're in, the board has formed the finance committee in order to begin the budget development process, obviously much earlier. Here we are in May as opposed to October. So with that guidance, having read the charge and having a full contingency of the finance committee, I would turn it over to the finance committee to elect a chair.
I nominate Al to be chair.
I'll second.
Any objection?
No, if you want me to, I can do it.
And second by Brian. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I'd call a vote. All those in favor? Are you abstaining?
Yeah.
Okay. So 2 in favor, 1 abstention, Al abstained. Okay, Al, you're the chair of the committee. Let's move through the agenda.
All right, so it looks, you already reviewed the charge and read the public thing. So the next up is to determine a consistent meeting date. So what works for everybody?
And could I add, Al, that we are meeting today in person just because it was the organizational meeting, and my recommendation to the committee was that we revert back to remote learning after tonight's meeting. Is that okay with everyone?
I would prefer to do the remote meeting. It just, first of all, it's really hard to do this with a mask, and I think it's for convenience sake, we can do it and work with all the minutes, so I think that's a great idea.
I'm fine with that.
So having said that, what is a good day or time that works for everyone? I think you probably have the toughest schedule, right, Michael?
I suppose. I think this time is good. We had a separate committee meeting in Madbury that I was part of that is suspended for the time being.
Okay.
So until that resumes, I think that the alternate Wednesdays with the school board meetings are fine.
Yeah, that works for me. I would just assume do it that way.
So Wednesdays opposite the school board meeting?
Perfect. So that would mean, okay, let's
You're booked every Wednesday.
pull up the schedule. So that would mean we have a school board meeting May 20th, is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So the first meeting that the first of our official Zoom or team virtual meetings would be May 27th at 6 p.m.
Awesome, thank you, Al.
Okay, so next up then, and there were a couple that came in, they're included in the agenda packet, which is to review the board questions. And I'll just pull over, like Michael had a couple. He had two that are short-term and two that are long-term. The first of the short terms, which expenses or capital items can be deferred out of the 2021 budget? The second one, what is the estimated tax rate impact of budget reductions in December 2020 local tax rates? For example, a reduction of $100,000 in expenses would mean how much tax impact for each of Durham, Lee, and Madbury? In terms of the long-term ones, which actually were right in my mind as well, how should the budget for the FY 2022 be structured? And the second one is, what should the budget goal be for FY 2022? Tom Newkirk sent in 6 questions. They are there non-negotiables in our planning, i.e. cost-cutting measures we cannot or will not take? For example, increasing class sizes. Number 2, what could we expect from the state? Will the increase to Lee and Madbury for this year be continued? Number 3, will the town's ability to collect taxes be affected by the pandemic? If so, how much? What effect will this have on our planning? Number 4, if the trend of smaller kindergarten and primary enrollments continue, can we plan for fewer classes? Number 5, how much can we save by a large-scale offer on a retirement buyout? Number 6, how should this pandemic affect our upcoming, and I believe that would be contract negotiations? Sue, who is the unit that's up for negotiation this time?
Bus drivers.
Bus drivers.
And I think Paris.
Is that
Paris. Bus drivers in Paris.
Paras are definitely up this year.
Paris
I'll
are
have to
up?
double check that, but
So Brian, do you have any questions? Did you want to add to the document?
No, they're all on the same line that you've already had. Be repetitive.
Any else? Do you have any, Jim, that you wanted to add?
Well, guidance from the board, because obviously between meetings, Sue and I have other things we're doing. So in terms of chopping up the work, I guess my question would be, what's the baseline information the committee wants to work from? So, and then, you know, in terms of staggering the work, prioritizing the questions would be helpful, you know, so that each time we meet, we'll have the information you need to have the next discussion. So just trying to make sure that the committee has the information it needs to feel like it's moving forward. So I guess my first question is, what would be the baseline data that you would like coming into the first meeting on the 27th?
Do we have certain accounts or line items that we have the most wiggle room in? I mean, it's something along that line where we have the most variability that we can control.
Yes, I think.
Things we have the most control over that we can affect versus things we don't have control over. Like funding from the state, you know, we don't have control over that.
Right.
You know,
I
so.
mean, there are obviously lines that are more flexible than others. When you look at the school budget, it's about roughly 80% salaries and benefits. Then you have utilities, which, you know, can be impacted a bit. Probably the item that we have the most discretion on is the capital improvement account, and then how much is being expended this summer, and then how much can we sit on through the school year and get a sense of where we are as we move through the budget.
I think probably a list of, I guess, needs versus wants. So if we have something that we need to, you know, maybe push off, but we also have to figure out if that's going to cost us more down the road if we do push it off. But I want to, you know, I think right now, especially with the economic unknown that we're going into, I think we have to know what we need, you know, is more important versus what we would want. And I think we may have to look at that a little bit to see whether the wants are something we're going to have to cut back on.
I think we also are in a position by the next meeting to give you a sense of what we anticipate the end of the year balance will be, and that will be an important figure for the committee and for the board ultimately, of course, to get a handle on, because that can feed into our trust accounts and not to prepare for the 2021 budget year.
Can I ask you a question, Jim? And that,
Sure.
I think it's raised in your short-term question, which is the fiscal, what is this, 2021 budget. And that is, if we were able to grab something to raise our fund balance above what was anticipated, could we roll that then and use that in the fiscal 21-22
Yes.
budget?
That's the only
Yeah.
year it gets used in. You technically don't have that option in next year's tax rate. So the budget that was voted on went to DRA, and that's the budget that the tax rate will be set on. So to your question, Michael, is there anything we can reduce? If we reduce, it's just going to go in fund balance, and it won't impact the December 20 tax bill.
But it would give us, so can you
It'll
take
be the
that?
21 tax bill.
They'll give us wiggle
This
room.
year's fund balance goes towards
Right.
that.
So my question was, because we were able, I seem to remember, I could be wrong with this, that the state allowed us to take, without going to a warrant, we could take a percentage of the fund balance and put it into our crisis
Emergency.
budget.
Yep.
And so my thought process on that is whatever we're over the fund balance this year, if we are indeed, that we would or at least ask the board if they were willing to transfer that into the emergency fund and then do the same. The idea would be, is there any savings that we could eke out in the fiscal 2021 budget so that we could also then feed into the emergency fund?
So when you say this year, you're referring to
Fiscal 2021, but the
fiscal
July 1st
21?
budget.
Okay, okay.
The current July 1 budget.
Right.
Yes.
Next budget, yeah.
I think so. I think, I would tell you, Alice, and Michael and Tom and I got into this conversation as I think last time we were doing the agenda. And you can do, traditionally what would happen in a school system is if you're short on revenue or you think you're concerned about revenue is you'd go into the fiscal year incredibly conservative. You often hear the words budget freeze.
Right.
And what that really means is that you're only going to do half two expenditures in the new budget, as opposed to going back to Brian's comment of wants versus needs. As the board reviewed the budget that we're coming into, it determined what those needs are. Can some of those needs be delayed? Yes. It's not like the budget has a lot of wants in it. It's more like, this is our strategic plan, this is how we're feeding into the strategic plan. And then, as we developed the budget that starts on July 1st, we deferred capital improvement projects. And when we were doing that, we talked about the fact that we would probably have to do that again. And, so that well will be tapped. Then the issue of being super conservative as starting on July 1 is really important for the very reason that you said, which is, the voters have provided us an opportunity to have a trust account or a capital emergency account. And, however much we can put into that, we should be putting into that, because we know that the 21-22 budget is going to be Herculean if all these revenue shortfalls actually materialize at the state level. And, tax collection at the local level sinks concurrently. So, yeah, I think so. I think that, the message that we should be sending out to the school as a whole, the school department, and to the towns is, it isn't business as usual. We're going to have to be super conservative over these next 24 months, most likely, until the economy has a chance to get some traction.
So along those lines, that what Brian was saying, can we identify in the fiscal 2021 budget potential areas of savings that we could use to hopefully increase the size of the fund balance? So that would be like kind of an investigation thing you guys can look at and say, okay, well, you think this is an area we don't need, or this may not be an area we need.
Yep. I think we need to do that. I think, again, in terms of chunking it out, maybe we do it, academic versus operations, just so we can get the work done in a timely way, so it provides you the information. Sue and I can do the legwork on that and then share it with the three of you, and you can make decisions based on that information. But yeah, we can do that.
And I want to make sure too that whatever we're looking to trim, first of all, we use a scalpel versus a machete, which I think goes without saying, but we have to make sure that we still balance that, providing the quality education doesn't affect the quality, that ultimately becomes our decision, is how does it affect the quality of education in the district? Because there's certain things we can cut that could curtail that, and there's certain things we can cut that will have no effect on it. We want to make sure that we balance that the taxpayers at least understand we're still doing that as part of our mission to do what we're doing, so.
So Michael, you have anything else? What else do you prioritize?
So I think Sue answered part of one of my questions, but my short-term questions were geared around not the 2021, well, or not beyond, but what happens in the 2021 year and the tax rates for that year. It sounds like our only lever for what happens in the December tax rate is probably how much of the fund balance we retain or not at the end of the current fiscal year. So I think that kind of answers that right there. I think it might be helpful to get a little bit more clarity and I don't know if it's the DRA or if the towns have any indication of if the state is planning to do anything different about how tax rates are administered this year. We're coming up very quickly on the June property tax rate, which is usually just half of the previous year's rate times new assessments. And if they're not planning to change that at all, then that is what it is, and it doesn't matter what anybody does, it just is what it is.
I mean, when I'm in very casual conversations, nothing official, the indication I get is that the towns aren't so much worried about the first half of the fiscal year as they are the second half. Is that fair, Al?
Yeah, our tax bills technically go out mid-May, and they're due July 1st. And so I don't really know, we don't know what to expect, but I think your characterization is really clear. I think the second half will be much more difficult.
Yeah, the first half is all calculated and ready to roll. It's
Yeah.
just based on the last year's. It's the tax setting in October that is
Yeah, and I
will
think
take into effect anything that's changed and a new budget, new revenues, fund balance.
a good baseline for this work, if the town, we need to be sharing with the towns that we've started this work already, obviously, but a data point for us to look at is the recession of 2008 and what happened to tax collections then.
Can you guys just speak closer in the mic? Wendy's having trouble.
Thank you.
hearing. Sorry.
Well, with that in mind, and I think that was one of the questions about talking with the towns, we can reach out to Gail and the Durham Town Office and find out after July 1st what the tax collection looks like. And we can get that data and kind of get a sense of what's going on. And I think we can probably do the same with Lee and Madbury as well.
I think it would be helpful for us to just understand from a process perspective too, if property taxes are underpaid, is that purely from a legal perspective, not that we don't want to be good partners, but from a legal perspective, is that purely on the towns?
That's why they're
Yes.
required to retain a certain amount of their balance.
Right.
So they have retained earnings, and they have 2 pockets of money for that, and partially, that's for that reason.
It's an allowance for.
Yep, it's an allowance. It's a percentage, and they get to choose what that percentage is, and usually they know what percentage isn't paid, and, so they know how to manage that. But this will be a different year for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, no
Obviously,
question.
and that will all happen in October. They'll all be thinking about that, and they'll have the history from the July bill to know what might happen in that case, so.
Well, I guess the good news along those lines is, our estimated impact on the towns was relatively modest based on our estimates, and we'll know, more in the fall exactly how they played out. So at least that part is a bit of a silver lining. We didn't hit anybody with huge anticipated tax impact on this budget.
Although if we look back to the recessions like you were talking about, I think the problem we ran into then, obviously I was on the board then, but was we gutted the capital improvement budget, which ended up costing us a ton more money down the road. So I think we got to make sure that we don't follow that same bad path we went down, but at least do some minimum to upkeep, so we don't cost ourselves future expenses.
I mean, I think we're in
much.
I was here then, and it's like, at the impact, I think 2012 is when I came on. And I think we're in far better shape in terms of capital improvement than then.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. I think Brian's point is well taken, though, is if we take away, we got to be thinking about how we're going to restore those accounts in future budgets. So it's, a bit of a short, and I think this is characterized in Michael's question, short-term issues versus long-term issues. And part of the long-term issues is making sure that we don't create a continual deficit in capital improvement and that we restore funds as soon as we can. But we also don't have to restore them all at once any more than we built them all at once. So just having a plan. The other point I would make is, and this is really important, I think, for our parental community, is as we look at the cuts we have to make, I think the issue that Brian raised is critically important, which is, Oyster River is Oyster River because of the people we have and the commitment they've had. And, we've seen really great improvement in the time since you were elected, Al. And we don't want to sacrifice the quality of the education to just draconian cuts, that we have to be surgical in our cuts. And, every cut will have an impact, but will it impact the quality of the program that we have? And I think that's the piece that's going to be a bit subjective as we go through this, but realistically, we also have to be cognizant of the times we're in.
So did you have more to add? Because it sounded like you had more in the long term.
Well, even on the short term, I think, because it does sound like we are, a lot of this is, what do we shift from this year to next year? What do we shift from next year to the year beyond?
Yep.
And it's kind of 1 year at a time, back and forth, is kind of the way the levers work in a lot of ways. So I think it would still be helpful to know, to have a sense of what does, when we're trying to decide how much of the fund balance should we retain, for example, what is the impact of $100,000 of retained fund balance or not retained fund balance on the December tax rate?
Right, so it's actually viewed as a revenue, so it's an
Right.
increase in revenue, and at one point I had done that.
Because my understanding is that they're going to use the voted appropriations from March,
Yep.
no matter what, no matter how much we say we're going to curtail expenses, but we can still provide input on the revenue side into what goes into the December tax rate. So,
Yep.
Another factor in that is update on the Barrington registration situation.
Yeah, so as of today, we're at 49 of the 50 students that we would hope to have come in the fall. The rough numbers, when we were building the budget, I think they had like 56 kids, and so half dozen of them chose Co-Brown or Dover. And so we're above our estimate in the budget, but below the 50. So that actually is, we're in much better shape this year going into the fall than we were a year ago. So we've recovered from that. So that did not turn into a trend, thank goodness.
Yes, so whatever that number is compared to the budget would be good to know as well.
We can get to that.
Yeah. I mean, Tom asked the question about what can we expect from the state. I don't know how we answer that, given that the legislature is not meeting right now. And
well, some of the questions that we ask, we won't have the answers to
Right.
immediately. Some we can do immediately, and we just, as soon as we have that information, we can roll it into the discussion and carry it forward. I think that, based on the economic picture at the state level, I'd be surprised if that extra $750,000 survives. On the other hand, when you look at some of our poorer school systems in the state, that money is critical for their operations. So there is going to be this tug and conquered about, keeping that money in the budget.
Yeah.
There already was some emergency money released. Durham got, I think it's $360,000 came in from the state. I don't know what Lee and Madbury have, but that would be interesting to.
What is that? Is that from the COVID-19 accounts?
Yeah,
Oh, you
yeah.
guys did way better than we did. We're getting
Yeah.
$39,000,
The school district.
school district.
And it's a grant, it's a grant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not
We were
like a revenue.
anticipating 60, and we ended up with 39, so.
I don't know how it works, but again,
So Durham did get,
Durham did, yeah, we got money.
Oh, that's-
So
that's
it's like,
great.
again, I don't,
Okay.
be interesting to see what
Good
Lee
to
and
know.
Madbury got as well.
so
Probably
an
not
extra
as much.
100,000 of fund balance increase reduces the tax rate by 7 cents. I did do that.
Okay.
7 cents.
7
So-
cents, yeah.
And then my final question for the fiscal year '21 is regarding the treatment of the bond interest. So there was a dollar amount of bond interest in the ballot measure. Is that what we are going to levy regardless of what the actual payment is going to have to be in February? Or is there some other, does that adjust based on the actual bond
It
issue?
was a percentage of the amount financed, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, that number is part of the budget, and that's what will be taxed on, but
Okay.
the actual number is what we'll be able to expend.
Right.
So anything left will be fund balance.
Okay, so once that happens, once the bond issue happens, we'll,
We'll know.
all right, okay.
I thought you were talking about the bond payment in the first year? That's
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
thought.
the
That's-
February interest payment, yeah.
That is the interest payment, yeah.
So from a more long-term perspective, when we look at fiscal '21, '22, and that's going towards like, how do we figure out what a budget goal is? Can we roll over the non-negotiables, the contract, the things that we absolutely know that we're going to have to pay, which is all the contracts that we're obligated, and whatever the other non-negotiables are, and come up with what a baseline increase that is over our current budget?
When you say non-negotiables, what are you referring to, Al?
All the union
costs.
contracts,
Oh,
teachers'
yes. Yeah,
contracts,
yeah.
all the contractual stuff that we have to do.
Leases,
The teachers, the bus drivers, everybody that we're doing. I think the other one would be, of course, non-negotiable, would be the payment on the middle school bond and that kind of things we absolutely
Almost
have.
like a default budget, almost.
Exactly. No, I mean, so then what I think we would pull out of that would be from the capital improvement plan, anything that is, because that potentially is negotiable. But I'd like to get a sense of what just even baseline our increase is coming into 21.
That's very similar to the message that Sue usually develops in the September timeframe.
Yep.
So we can advance that forward. Every time we do that, we always have to caution that, these are the best estimates we have at this time, but we certainly can do that, resurrect that memo and update it.
Yeah, it's just that I would prefer to do it once we do all the hiring, because that impacts it. If you want it now, it's, basically, you could just look at what the warrant article was, and then health insurance, what do you want to put in for that, and that's pretty much it, those are the biggies.
So that's the other thing that we do over the course now of the next several months is replacing people. We had 3 retirements at the elementary schools, and so there should be some savings there. We're in the process of hiring psychologists and special educators. Unfortunately, the special ed position we have open right now is one of those special ed positions that requires a tremendous skill set. One of the classes that we have that has the neediest of the needy. So we can come out ahead in some places. We may not come out ahead in every single instance, but we keep a running tally of that at the office. So by the time we meet in the fall, we know what the results are. But we can continuously, well, you'll see it every time we make a nomination, but we keep a spreadsheet on the total. And then ultimately, it boils down to what health insurance plan people take. And so that usually is later in the summer when Teresa's meeting with them, but we keep that running tally, and we can keep that tally going, and you guys can see it. It's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward. What's the position that they replaced, and then what's the insurance they chose compared to the person they replaced, and then what's the net? Is it a gain or a loss? And we've been pretty cautious over the years, so that other than that first year where we had a problem with one person hiring the most expensive people on the planet. The administrators have been doing a really good job over the years of bringing in some younger talent, not necessarily newbies.
I mean, I think when I'm looking at it, it's just going to be, we're going to have a really difficult time with offsetting revenue. And I just want to get a sense, I mean, the capital improvement is a big chunk, and so I'm just trying to see how bad it is when we look at the contracts. Is it 3.5%? Is it 4%? What are we just looking at as a baseline to start with? Because, you know, we've kind of crept from 3% to 3.5% where we started working up, and going into this, I just have a real hard time saying that we're going to do a 3.5% increase in the budget.
Well, and then the unique thing we have, of course, is the bond payment.
Right.
So, you know, so that is exactly why I asked for this committee to exist, because it's going to be all the way through this, you know, going back and forth and trying to figure out how we get from here to there.
Because I think that a big discussion will be, especially, it's really hard with so much uncertainty, but we do have our accounts that we've set money aside for, so how do we strategically use those
Exactly.
accounts, and how does that fit into 2021, or 21, 22, and then 22, 23? We can't deplete everything and have nothing left, so.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to get a figure, how do we bring it down to a reasonable budget goal number, whatever that is, strategically using our accounts?
I agree.
So when we talk about breaking the budget down into the obligation, the contractual obligations, and then the other categories, do you want that, I mean, I guess what categories do we think we're going to see when we do that? Obviously, we've got salaries and benefits, we've got contractual obligations around the high school bond and bus leases and the Siemens lease, but then there's other things. Do we want, is it just everything else, or is it, are there
I mean, I
certain?
think, what does it take to basically kind of keep the school running? you know?
Forward.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, because we're going to have in there like electricity, propane, fuel, that kind of stuff. I mean, the best estimate that we can come up
Yeah.
with, that is stuff that we know to run the school.
So we would like that in some general categories, not just
I think a general.
fixed or not fixed.
Yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
a general categories would be a really good way to do it.
You do get some of that general information when we present the budget on some
Right.
of those. Is that, I mean, if you can just tell us and we can do it that way. Should we look back at what we've done in
And
the
that's what we're
past?
doing, is we're grabbing that beforehand. I'm just trying to get a sense of how bad it is.
And also, what about department heads or whatever, kind of, I'm sure they're already doing this, but they're out in the prowl for new grant money that's out there that we may qualify for, that may help offset certain things, you know, that we're already doing, that maybe we can slide them into a grant versus the position into a grant versus
Yeah.
a funded position.
So we're, as a school system, I mean, we have done that, and we're partnering right now with the Durham Police Department on a $500,000 grant for the new school, but Oyster River is a very weak candidate for grants when we're competing against Rochester and Farmington and the districts that, you know, just don't have the same property value base that we have. And so there are grants, but they're just, it's not something that is easy for us to do, easy for us to get.
Anything else? Does that give you enough to go on, Jim?
Well, I think it's more than enough. I think, you know, what I'd like to do is just prioritize for a minute what you want for the next meeting.
Okay.
It sounds like what I'm hearing, if I'm interpreting everything right, is what you would like the most for the 27th is for Sue and I and her staff to get to the base budget. What is it that we have absolute obligation to that we can't avoid? And then that's a good starting point. That's what I think, what I asked you earlier, what's the best starting point? I think that's a really good starting point because it really sets the base. We know what it'll be at that point.
I think something that's easy that will be helpful also is the updated fund balance projection for this
Updated
current
fund
fiscal
balance.
year.
Yep.
And I know you've given this to us not too long ago, but the reserve accounts
Just to refresh our
balances.
memories.
Yep. Terrific. I mean, that'll keep us busy for a couple weeks.
As if you weren't already.
And you won't be joining us for that one, right? Is that your,
On the 27th?
yeah.
Why did they say I wasn't? Did I indicate that I couldn't be?
When we were talking about other meetings, I thought you were not available that week. That's the week of Memorial Day.
I didn't look. Let me look, Michael.
It's the Wednesday after Memorial.
Yeah.
Right. No, I'm good.
Okay,
Yeah.
But we're going to do that remotely.
Yeah.
Next meeting will be remote.
okay.
But we'll make sure you have all the documents for that meeting that day.
Okay, so are we missing anything?
If you want any
Anything else?
revenue, I can always run that, if you're interested in seeing that. I mean, that's an easy one.
Run
Yeah.
what, Sue?
5-year history of revenue or something like that, just so you can see those revenues we have. I mean,
Can't hurt.
no,
Trends, stuff like that. would be
Yeah.
good.
And should we add to the list, perhaps a letter to the select boards and council that we've started this process already? Just so if they
Yeah.
want to provide us any information, or we ask them for any information, they're more receptive to it. I know that, Madbury's a very small community, and resources are Eric and Eric and Eric. So, if we're going to ask the towns for anything, that would be like the 2008. Durham may have it, but, Madbury may or may not, depending on, how they kept those records.
I think it's a really good idea, and I'll bring it up. I mean, of course, I think it's next, I'm losing track of the days, but I think it's next Monday, we have a town council meeting, and during the council roundtable, I'll talk about this and kind of give them an update, and, I can relay along stuff that we're looking for.
And should we tell the school board, or ask the school board on Wednesday for permission to write a letter to the towns? Because we typically always are trying to engage the full board in blessings and
We
communication.
can, I mean, certainly, and I think that we should tell everybody we are really interested in collecting information. I think it's really important for each of the communities, because the school budget and the town budget are going to fit together, that we each really are clear on what we're doing.
And we want to operate with the most amount of information available to us.
Yeah.
And that's why we're really going to go full circle,
Yeah, okay. So the non-negotiables in terms of what our obligations are, the fund balances in our emergency accounts and trust accounts, did you say 5 years of revenue, Sue?
yeah, I'll do 4 years in
Okay.
the current year. I've already done that, actually, because I
And a letter to
wanted to
the
look at it.
towns? That's what we'll try to produce for the 27th?
Yeah, that seems like,
Can I add one more?
sure.
So that we talked about the number of Barrington students, but also I think we have enough information to estimate what the tuition, based on the formula in the contract, would be for next year?
Yep. So that would
well-
be an estimate, because we have to calculate what our own tuition is before we,
But we also use the October 1
Well,
count
that's what
to
I was-
do
that's
that,
what I
so,
was-
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
typically,
So
it's
you'd
been a
be guessing.
percentage,
Right.
so we could just apply a percentage to the current rate and just assume low. No.
Well, it's based mainly on the amount of the budget that's allocated to the high school.
Yeah.
So we
We
do know.
can do that.
Yeah, we just don't know the student numbers.
Right.
Cool. Well, we'll do our best to make sure you have these for the 27th for your discussion, and we'll go from there.
Anything else? I guess we should formally make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.